we're all just tickled that everybody is here. As we talk about, Wiggsy and her life, and then we get some special people to talk about their work with her. It just really shows how many people she's worked with on how many different issues for how many decades. And it really just feels like a reunion for everybody to sort of see each other, probably haven't seen each other in a long time, and I know that's true for Wiggsy as well. So thanks for being here. Also, thanks for being here for the very first event by the Baymek Community Foundation. This is our inaugural event, so it's wonderful that you're here. And certainly want to mention all of our great sponsors that we have. Appreciate the extra contribution that they made to the event, and really helped us make sure that this was a good start for the foundation. So you'll see all of their cards, but really appreciate all of their support. And so I'm going to come over here now, and because we want to hear from Wiggsy. And one of the things, again, as we were talking about the sponsors, our gold sponsor was the Mike and Mary Ellen Community Foundation. And so they're really glad, Family Foundation, wonderful that you're here. And I know those are special friends of yours, Wiggsy, and didn't know if you wanted to start off and talk about your relationship with the Foxes and how they really represent the kind of work that you've been doing in the community.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for being here. I know this was a challenge for you, but I do want to say something. One of the things that I wanted to say about the Foxes is that from my standpoint, they are really, truly the kinds of stars that we need in this world.
Yes.
Some years ago, I'm going to say this, some years ago when we were doing the gay marriage thing, you all remember that time, when the weird people were going weirder. One of the things that I called Mike and asked him if he would come and talk with me, or would talk with me about the gay marriage, because I really wanted his support. And he said, sure, I'll be right over. I'm going, I'm at the university. Why would you come over here? You can't even park. But he came, and he did, and he was in my office. And he handed me a newspaper like this, and he said, I don't think I can be with you on this one, Wiggsy. I remember this. And I said, okay, because he had the bishop's newsletter. And, the bishops were a little uptight about gay marriage. And so I said, but he said, I want to hear from you. So I sat down and I talked with him, maybe for about an hour in my office. And he looked at me afterwards a little while and he said, okay, well, thank you, Wiggsy. I'm going to talk to the bishop now and tell him he's wrong. Now, there are many reasons about why that's really important to me. But one of the biggest reasons is that Mike is a very staunch religious person. And I have come to be a little bit concerned about religious people over the years because they're not necessarily always kind. But I thought to myself, now that's a hero. That's what the definition of a hero is, somebody who has values and is willing to challenge those values and step out for us. And so I want to thank both of you very, very much. You're very special to me.
Yeah.
Very special.
Round of applause. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit more about your tactics, Wiggsy. You're not always somebody who calls somebody over and has an hour conversation with them, especially if they're on the other side of the issue. So maybe talk a little bit, how do you bring people around, other than trying to use logic, but that doesn't often work. And if there are a couple examples of some arguments, heated arguments you've had with some perhaps elected officials that then over time came to realize that they needed to support our community.
Well, first let me say, there's no way I'd be here if it wasn't for Ken. No way. I am probably the most disorganized, irresponsible person when it comes to following up on things, and Ken has been there every step of the way and prodded me along and made this happen. This is Ken's doing. So I think it's really important to know that. When Ken and I decided we wanted to do something like BAMEC, we actually had lunch in this very place when it was Eulipia. The very day that we sat down and talked about lunch was in this place. And, you know, it's no longer Eulipia, it's become something else now, Stretch.
Cafe Stretch.
I don't get around much, you know, but anyway. So we sat down, and I want to tell you, this was probably the last good meal that I had with Ken through many campaigns, because Ken was always, there's Denny's, there's a bowling alley, not exactly a gourmet eater. But we hit all of the restaurants in town because we had many, many meetings together and talked many, many hours. And I'm thrilled that finally the foundation is beginning to get started, because it's always been a dream of ours for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Well, 35 years ago. We've been doing this for 35 years.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. And, you know, when I first came to San Jose State, I came to San Jose State in 1967, just out of graduate school. I was in the closet. San Jose State was not particularly a friendly place at that time, so I had to be really careful. I'd gotten fired from a job because they found out I'm lesbian. I thought, these people are really stupid. I'd worked for them for 4 years and they couldn't figure it out for 4 years.
Woo!
Yeah, really stupid. Anyway, so when I came to San Jose State, one of the things that was clear to me is that we needed to have a world where we talked about issues of discrimination, not only against the GLBT community, which is, you know, certainly a reason that we're here, but also against other communities based on race and ethnicity, gender or disability, all kinds of things. You know, if we discriminate against anybody, my motto always was, and it was Ken's too, we decided we weren't going to just do gays. We were going to make a difference in this world about people feeling comfortable being who they are, regardless of what they look like or who they socialize with. And we've stayed close to that motto all along. And I think it's a really important motto for us to face. We are no longer in a place where we can just have, be concerned about discrimination against the gay GLBT community. We can. But we have to also be concerned about what's going on in the world, and particularly what's going on in this country.
Amen. Amen.
What's going on with kids and people who are coming into the country looking for a safe place is really very agonizing to me and to my friends. So we got to keep working. Lot more to do.
A lot more to do, and I think one of the things that BAMEC has tried to do over the years, and it was the reason for my coming out in 1984, is when our state assembly member with the unfortunate name Alistair McAllister wrote an article for the Mercury News saying that gay people were so despicable that they deserved no social, political, or legal rights at all. And the message was, we just don't even want you as part of our society. And when you think about what is happening now, particularly with immigrants or people who speak a different language or have a different religion, it's that same kind of message. We don't even want you to contribute. We don't want you here at all. And I think that LGBTQ people know that feeling. And I think one reason why we work so much in government is that government really has the ability to have community engagement of everybody in society. And but I really credit you, Wiggsy, for those early days. Because the gay community was so low on the totem pole because of various things that had happened that it was hard, I think, for some of the minority groups to even have us at the table, because of fear that all of a sudden that they were going to lose political clout because we were there. But we always stuck through and worked with them, and were able to sort of do that Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah, it was really great. I made a lot of friends in this valley.
Well, you were, going back to San Jose State there, as you said, there since 1967. One thing I'd be curious to know is how many people in the room met Wiggsy, particularly when she was a counselor at San Jose State, and certainly as a... and we're going to talk a lot about some of your other work at the university. But if you could sort of reflect on the times, because now we're talking early 70s, you were pretty much the only out professor on campus. It must have been hard for LGBTQ students with really nowhere to go, trying to figure out their own sexuality, trying to see if they can figure out what's happening in their lives. What was sort of the experience for them?
Well, it was pretty awful. But the thing about it is that when I went there in '68, one of the things that happened. One of the things that happened was, sorry, gang, is that it became clear that we needed to have a place on campus for students, and we needed to have an organization. And a man by the name of Paul Wysocki, who has deceased now, really sat down and said, okay, let's do it, and started a gay student group. And actually the Associated Students at San Jose State paid for us, to have a group, which was really quite remarkable. And this, we're talking 68, they're 69 maybe. And it was very moving to me. The chancellor, who was a true fool in every sense of the word, could not get the idea across that we needed to have a GLBT group, and no T in those were days, but that they had to have a group for our students. And although he was not happy about it and tried to make sure that the university wouldn't do anything rash, like have a group, we actually managed to have one. And from that and Paul's work, we actually started a gay group. The faculty, well, they were another story. Not the bravest souls in the world. I used to go to meetings, and some of the faculty that I knew were sisters and brothers, and they must have known that I knew would not talk to me, because being close to me meant that they were going to be suspect. Because I made it a point to let people know that I was a lesbian all the time. Now, I didn't think I needed to tell people. I thought, well, it's pretty obvious, right? Well, apparently it wasn't. But, we went round and round. I've had a few fights with the presidents, but they came around. In time they would get it. And come around. So I just think the campus was a great place for students to begin to get some sense of social responsibility. And in some ways we were lucky, because we were on the heels of the Black student movement, on the Latino student movement, on the women's movement. So when our gay group started, at least the idea of having something like that on campus had already been planted for our students, and it really helped a lot. So.
Well, I just really want to speak for some of the students that are here that were talking to me beforehand, and with really tears in their eyes, saying that Wiggsy saved their lives, of the kind of counseling that you did when there really just wasn't anybody else to talk to.
I had a couple of gay guys over the years who would come and start complaining to me about they were gay and they couldn't be out, and they lived in the residence hall and they were really frightened. And I said, oh, for God's sakes, just go and tell them that you're a fag and get it over with. And they did. And lo and behold, it worked for them. They found a place where they could be themselves in the residence halls. Students are wonderful. I mean, San Jose State students are very special. And
Yes.
They have always worked hard to try to make a place. The university is really quite a wonderful place to try to make a place for those of us who belong to this community, and also to try to make sure that other people are included. It's important to include people in every aspect of our life.
And we're going to talk a little bit later about your work with the California Faculty Association. I know that Terry Christensen is going to mention some of that, but obviously you were very involved in many different aspects of San Jose State. Talking about another issue, we're all familiar with Black Lives Matters and the killing of young black men. Most people don't know the story of, this was in 1985, where a young man, Melvin Truss, was shot by a police officer in the police officer's car. Melvin had basically a steak knife, a pretty thin guy, weighed 115 pounds, short. The officer that shot him, Officer Ewing, something like 6'2", 200 and odd pounds, and shot him 5 times and killed him. And that really began your involvement with working with the San Jose police officers. Do you want to sort of reflect on that time? And, well, you must have gotten a real beating from everybody trying to begin to talk to him. Nobody from the police department was at all supportive.
No, actually, Ken and I went to the city council when Susan Hammer was mayor and talked about this incident because one of the top-level officers, had made a derogatory comment which we took offense to and said that we needed to educate the San Jose Police Department. In those days, they were not nice to our community. So I agreed to do a class, and I met with the San Jose police officers once a week on Mondays for an hour. That was a little insane. But we managed to get through it. One of the things that when I first went there, the first class I was teaching, you had to stand at a podium. It was quite formal. And I had to stand at a podium, and I heard this clunk, chunk, 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 chunk. I thought, well, what is that noise? And this wagon comes into the room with all these guns sitting on sticks like this that had been sent downstairs that the officers needed to get checked, which was a good thing. And so they couldn't wait until the class was over. They had to get up right now and get their guns. I thought, okay, so I just kept on talking. But the problem was when they sat down, they then took their guns, and as they loaded them, they pointed them in my direction. And I thought, oh, please. I wasn't born yesterday. And I just kept right on talking, and I said, well, part of the problem with having somebody who's a therapist teach a class is all behavior is interpreted. And they just pulled back, and realized that it wasn't going to get them anywhere. They weren't going to chase me out. It was hard for them, but little by little, we would work it out in each class. And I had officers come up, which really made me very sad. I had officers come up behind me and walk past behind me and do this and say, "Thank you very much, my brother's gay. I'm glad you're here." Could not say anything, were very quiet. But to me, the 3 or 4 officers that were able to do that over the period of time, it was worth it. Because they finally found a place for their siblings or their friends, and that was an important place. And San Jose has become a very, very different place now. The chief that we have now has a gay group. James Gonzalez works for the San Jose Police Department. Hand up, hand up.
And I think there's somebody else in your life who works for the San Jose Police Department.
Oh, well, my partner.
Jeannie, where are you? Woo! Center stage as always, I can see.
She always tells me I'm not supposed to talk about her. Yeah, but it's a strange marriage. When you have somebody like me who wasn't always nice about cops and somebody who is a cop, we sometimes have our difficulties, but we keep going. And Jeannie's, been with me now for over 20 years, so.
That's very sweet. It's a great relationship that you have. Great relationship.
You hear that?
Well, let's talk about another sad story connected to our community, and that's the story of HIV/AIDS and the tremendous toll that it took on so many of the people here, and certainly across the United States and the world. Maybe talk a little bit about those struggles and how we were able to make sure that they were getting the type of services that they needed at a time when everybody was so nervous about having anything to do with gay people, particularly gay people who had AIDS. And also, if you could talk a little bit about how it really brought the lesbian community together with the gay community, which hasn't always been easy in our community.
No, the gay community has been men here, women there. Back in the 50s, there was a period of time when men and women did get together and, did some political action, picketed for the rights of gay people. But for the most part, there was a separation. When AIDS came, it became very clear that gay men didn't really know how to take care of themselves in a nurturing kind of way. I don't mean to say that gay men are not nurturing. It's just that that's not what men do. That's what women do. So the women came back in to their relationships with men, and we had a lot of time together where we would help men who were struggling with the HIV. And at one point, it was a profoundly sad time in so many ways. Not only for those who were people that I knew who were dying and that we all knew, but because people were so onerous and poisonous. I remember Ken and I went to San Jose City Council to try and get something passed for HIV support and non-discrimination. And Ken was talking to the people on the city council, and this man in the back of the room said, well, you know what they ought to do with those people is they ought to put them on a concentration camp in an island someplace. And this was before Donald Trump. So they wanted to isolate us away because, after all, that's what it said in the Bible, that, gays were not human, they were bad people. And so we had to really struggle with them. The church group, some of them were wonderful. And certainly Mike Fox is a stunning example of that, and always gave me courage and a willingness to keep struggling. But it was very hard because families were split apart in the worst kind of ways. Lovers were split apart, brothers and sisters, friends, and people were colossally stupid. If I go to San Francisco, will I catch AIDS because somebody who's waiting on my table is HIV positive? Right. I think to myself, how do people get that stupid? It's really amazing to me how difficult it was to get people to think in a rational manner that this was an issue that really needed to be dealt with intelligence and thoughtfulness. But we had a lot of friends. We did a lot of work. We managed to move a lot of agenda. Then there was the wonderful Lyndon LaRouche, who decided that one of the things that we should be locked up is because we had something that was contagious. And then what was the other one? The other was, what was his first one?
For Dannemire, you're talking about 64?
Dannemire.
Yeah.
Dannemire.
Yeah, no, there were the 3 AIDS quarantine initiatives.
Yeah,
in
all
the,
of them. That they wanted to quarantine gay men. And lesbians were not considered in those days. I remember when Jerry Falwell, one of our illustrious people, came to San Francisco and said something about, we've got to do something about those gays and lesbians. I remember feeling, oh my God, he finally realized there are lesbians in the world. Because it's always gay men. Always the bad people were gay men. So it was a mixed blessing, but we got to recognize. But there were really some pretty awful people, and a lot of people got very hurt in terms of working really hard and trying to move things along. So it was a hard time for people.
I mentioned we tried to put them on everybody's tables if you didn't get them, but the 2 booklets, one on the history of HIV/AIDS in Santa Clara County, and then the struggle for LGBTQ equality, and some of those stories that Wiggsy is talking about are in those booklets. Well, as we approach in just a couple days, the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, I know that you worked with Harvey Milk. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and Prop 6 and your recollections of those days?
Yeah, the guy by the name of
Briggs.
Briggs, who decided that gays should not be allowed in the classroom. Ken and I went through the Boy Scout thing. I have to tell you, in a really kind of malevolent sort of way, I went when I saw the paper article about the Boy Scouts the other day, about them misappropriating their behavior on young Boy Scouts, because they didn't want to let us in, and we were not acceptable, and so we went through a period of time of trying to get people to understand that we were just like everybody else and that we weren't a problem. But the whole business of I remember, I was also on the Domestic Violence Council with Rolanda Pierre Dixon. We used to have wonderful time because Rolanda was a district attorney and I was a shrink. And we were talking about domestic violence. And from my standpoint, these were people that really needed to be psychologically evaluated. And so we would have these huge arguments. But one of the things that was always interesting to me is that Rolanda and the people on the domestic violence were always very good about recognizing that domestic violence happened in the gay community as well as in the straight community. And one of the people that moved that agenda was Dan McCorkadale, Senator McCorkadale.
Dan, do you want to wave?
His staff person called me up and said, we want to make some legislation that's inclusive of gays and lesbians when it comes to domestic violence, because sadly, you know, people in my community hit each other just like other people do, which is unfortunate. So we went and had meetings, and Dan was absolutely insistent at a time when nobody was talking about this, that if we were going to have policy in California about domestic violence, it was going to be inclusive of gays and lesbians. And for that, we should always be very appreciative.
Amen.
I have to tell you this one funny thing. One time, because I was on this committee with Rolanda, we had this guy who was a chief sheriff, something, came in with his gun in his head. He was real tough, you know, into our meeting at 7 in the morning, idiot. And started sitting down and going, well, are you just think that we should, why don't they just move those gay people out of town? I don't know if you remember this. Just move them. There won't be a problem. And move the people who are getting hit. You know, just move them. Have them go to another town. You know, I thought, what a good idea. I had never thought of that. I told him, I said, oh, thank you. So the next time a bank gets robbed, should we move the bank too? He never came back.
You know, it's that easygoing nature of yours that really has just warms people over to your side.
It does. It does. It makes them all feel so loved. So yeah, you know, I mean, you have to be tough. You have to be tough. You have to be good. You have to be gentle, but you have to be tough.
Well, let's talk about you having to be tough. And I've had to talk to you after many night meetings that you've come back, especially in those early days. And let's just be frank: the names you were called, the whispers behind your back, the things that you probably wanted to have happen but didn't because they didn't want to have you get any victories. Do you want to talk a little bit about sort of the personal cost this has been over the years?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly the first personal cost is when they found out that I was a lesbian and fired me from my job. That was really a profoundly painful experience for me because it was a fulfillment of my fantasy about what would happen if anybody ever found out. This was many years, and I was just coming out of graduate school. And so I had to go through that whole struggle of feeling like, boy, I'm really awful, because I had a program that was getting rewards for kids. I'd gotten the probation department to bring their naughty kids to the place where I was working to work with our kids. And the reason being, it seemed to me more sensible to have them working with our kids than going to jail because they wore bare feet to school or didn't wear a belt or some, you know, horrible crime. And so I had all these kids that work. Well, when I got fired, of course, that particular program was gone. They canceled that program right away. And it made me very sad because it was certainly a better place for young teenagers to be than to be in juvenile hall. And I wish there were places like that for them today. So, yeah, those are some of the good things that happened. I don't know, I thought to myself once, well, I didn't exactly have a happy household, and people weren't very nice in my household. I could put up with anything. I mean, it was a good training ground. So I actually was able to tolerate a whole lot of stuff. It didn't hurt me as much. I think one of the things that happened when some of you may remember Senator Alquist, who Ken and I were at a dinner for NWPC, which is the National Women's Political Caucus. And we went to him and asked him to support AB1. And he whipped around on us in this he's a big guy, and he looked at Ken mostly and said, well, as long as those men keep going to the bathrooms and doing the disgusting things they do, I will never support them. So I thought, oh my God. So anyway, I was mad. So I wrote him a letter, a stinging letter, and talked to him about your history as a labor person, your history as a senator. You know, you have always talked about being a man that was out for the good of the damaged ones. And I said, and shame on you for not voting on this because it really hurts kids. So I get this call on the telephone, and it's one of his one of his people, and she says, Wiggsy, can you come and meet with me? And I thought, oh, now what? Okay. So I went over and met with her, and she said, Al's very unhappy about your letter. And I said, well, it was not intended to be sweet. And she said, could you write him a letter of apology? And I thought to myself, you know, my first inclination was to say, are you kidding me? But I said, okay, because this is politics. You know, when I see what's going on, if we don't sit down and try to figure out how to embrace our enemy, we'll never get anywhere. So I sat down, I wrote him a letter on the Baymax stationery, and I did apologize, but I explained to him, you know, you can't treat kids like this. You know, you have a reputation as a senator that's, you know, outstanding, and why would you do this? Anyway, I get another call. Wiggsy, can you come and talk to me? And I'm going, oh, now what? So she says to me, Senator Al loved your letter. Could you write another one? And I thought, oh, okay. I hate to write letters. Anyway, I said, okay. So I went home, and on my personal stationery, I wrote him another letter, again apologizing, saying to him, you need to be on our side. You know, you need to, you know, pay attention to kids. It's hard about kids. And so pretty soon, I guess he got the letter. You know, the person who had called me said, well, he has both letters and they're in his sock drawer. I thought, well, you can read that two different ways. But I was at the university one day and I got a call from the front office, said there's a Senator Alquist on the telephone. I said, oh, now what? He wants another letter? Yeah. So I answered the telephone. He said, Wiggsy? And he's very gruff. He's a big guy, gruff voice. I said, yeah, hi, Senator, how are you? And he says, I'm fine. He said, I want you to be my date for the Baymax dinner. I said, you know, Senator, I don't do boys. He said, it's okay. It's okay. So I actually was his date for the Baymax dinner. And from that time on until he really got to the point where he was no longer able to come out, I used to go once a month and have lunch with him. And he got quite elderly and difficult. It was difficult with understanding. I'd sit there for an hour listening to him talk, but I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I would smile appropriately. And, you know, then we would do it again the next month. You know, I became quite fond of him because it does show people can change. And he voted for us, you know, and supported us until the day he left.
Well, one of the reasons I really wanted to have this event, and it's being filmed so it can be part of the archives of our community, is to hear stories like that. And I think one of the things that we really need to do is to talk to the folks who've been in the battle for so long and to tell those stories that we need to have to pass on to the other generation, and certainly learn about tactics and what's going to be effective and coalition building and meeting with elected officials. And again, I know that Senator McCorkadale was one of the first people that was willing to meet with us for breakfast at some ungodly 7 a.m. And you were never a morning person, but we were able to make it. It's a little warm in here. I'm going to ask you one last question, and then we're going to have some of your friends tell little funny stories about you. But what about the future? What's the future looking like?
Well, I think it's really mixed. I probably, like everybody in this room, think we really need to be really responsible as citizens. It really, really, really is disturbing to me that people don't vote. Really disturbing to me. It's never that you have the perfect candidate, but you certainly have the opportunity to have better candidates. And we cannot go another 4 years with this. And for me, it's not about Republicans and Democrats or liberals or socialists or any of that. It's about the well-being of people who really need government to take care of them. And many people in this room and many young people really need government to be safe, keep them safe. And so one of the things that I think is really, really important is that we continue to work really hard and see if we can get new people in Sacramento, and not in Sacramento, but in where is that city? Washington, thank you. I like to forget that. So what was the other part of your question?
Oh, it's just about the future.
Oh, I think, I say that because I think if this man continues in office, I think we're going to have to work really hard, because I think he is going to continue to try. He has to have people that he knows his constituents hate. And one of the things they hate is us. They hate people of color. They hate people who are immigrants. They hate people who are disabled. Remember his thing about the reporter. They hate reporters. So we are going to have to really get rid of this guy. Otherwise, we're going to be in really serious trouble. I was happy to see that some of the country outside, they have actually changed policies recently. There are places where just recently making homosexuality against the law was struck down. They can now, be with each other and not be challenged against it. There are still countries that really have a very hard time with us and want to kill us. So we have to keep educating them. We have to keep working. We have to keep trying to embrace people. One of the things, it's true, Ken said, well, you have to try to be sweet. I don't remember being sweet. But one of the things that I think really we have to do is that we have to pull people into our lives and care about them and let them see that, in fact, all of us together can make the world change for everybody. And so I think we have to think of the future. I don't think this, at one time, I remember I did an interview with somebody else and they asked me if they thought the fight for the gay community was over. I said, oh, hell no. I don't think it's over. And unfortunately, because I think there will always be people out there who want to slam somebody. And one group of people that is easy to slam are gays and lesbians, people of color, elderly people, people with disabilities. So I think we can't decide, okay, this is it. We can sit here in this place and have a great time, and aren't we having a good time, and don't we love each other, and go out of this room, and tomorrow somebody's going to be after us again. So please, keep your eyes open.
All right, thank you, thank you. We're going to hear from a couple folks who are going to give a little brief stories about Wiggsy. But before I do, I neglected to really, if you've noticed all of the graphics that we have, Shalika Riley from PRX did all of that. Shalika, where are you? You somewhere way up there? And I don't know if Brenna's around as well. But just really wanted to thank you for all of the work that you did on this event. So the first speaker we're going to have, somebody that we all know, and I think they're going to bring the microphone up here, is Dr. Terry Christensen.
So thanks to all of you for being here. These are my two oldest friends in San Jose, so it's really great to be able to say something about one of them tonight. Talk about the other one another time. So I just want to say quickly a couple of things about Wiggsy. One is about her role in all of us coming out. And the other is about her role as a social warrior for all sorts of causes, and most specifically for working people and union people, in which we had a particularly close relationship. So I met Wiggsy pretty early on at San Jose State. I was in the student council chambers for some kind of meeting, I have no clue what, and probably didn't have a clue then either because I was new. And this person comes walking in with a bicycle on her shoulder. Dressed, this is pretty much Wiggsy's uniform, so that's kind of what she looked like then and now. And obviously I thought, oh, bike with Dyke. No, actually I didn't think that because my gaydar was not particularly refined at that point, but I kind of had a clue. And Wiggsy was out then, as she's out now, as she's been out since that first firing. And just by Wiggsy being out and being who she is, she paved the way for all the rest of us to be out. She didn't tell all of us to go back to our dorms and tell them we're thanks. She let most of us come out on our own time, at our own pace. She never outed anybody. Like Harvey Milk, she certainly emphasized that we all should be out. That's a political act for LGBT people. But she didn't force it on anybody, and I appreciated that, Wiggsy. And actually, I outed Ken Yeager to Wiggsy Sievertson. She's nodding, I bet she doesn't actually remember. I don't know if Ken even knew this, but we were doing political work together. I'll get to that in just a minute. But I'm at Wiggsy's house. Ann was there, I think. And Wiggsy said, is that Ken Yeager? Is that Ken Yeager? Is he gay? And so I said yes. She asked, and I told her. And actually, I came out to Wiggsy then too. I know it was a big surprise. But from that day forward, I was out, we were out, and we're still out. The other piece I want to mention quickly about Wiggsy is her political work on behalf of working people, particularly faculty and staff unions. You know, when Wiggsy and I started at San Jose State, it wasn't legal for us to be union members. It wasn't legal for us to do a lot of things, but that was one of them. Wiggsy became president of the faculty union, and I was chair of the political action committee. And the faculty union and San Jose State are well represented here today. I wanted sponsorship of the events. That's something Wiggsy didn't have to do, but she did. So we became a political team. And we did lobbying. I bet we talked to Dan McCorkindale more than once. And we went around to all the political fundraisers and events. And we would go in, and I would point Wiggsy towards who she needed to talk to, and off she would go. And then she'd come back and say, okay, who else? And I would point her in the next appropriate direction. I think Wiggsy and I joked, and we kind of hoped that, oh, they'll gossip about us and think maybe we're a couple. I don't think that ever happened. But we kind of like to fantasize about it. And Wiggsy, if it had been said that we were a couple, I would have been proud of that. And I'm proud of our time together. So thank you.
I want to say one special thing about Terry is true. I didn't know anything about unions. I actually didn't really know anything. You know, when I first came to San Jose State, I didn't know people worked for a living, really. I mean, I came from kind of a gilded kind of family background. But when I did the Briggs initiative, this guy was really a pretty awful human being. And we worked hard on trying to figure out how to defeat this thing about gay kids in schools and gay teachers and whatnot. Finally, because I think, and then I think this was an important point that we have to pay attention to, because Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan actually stood up against Briggs and said this is unnecessary legislation. It's a duplicative of what's in the policy already, so let's not do it. And I really think that had a lot to do with why we won this campaign. Certainly Harvey Milk, I spent time talking with Harvey, worked really hard. But he was in San Francisco and we had to get it spread out of there. But we finally did win, and I was in my office at school, and the office staff person called me and said, Wiggsy, come and talk to me for a minute. There's somebody here who wants to see you. And it was Terry. Terry had walked into the office. I really didn't know him very well and handed me a red rose. I've never had a man give me a red rose. I seriously thought of changing my lifestyle.
All right, we're gonna continue on. You don't get to speak after each of these speakers. That was the first one. All right. Another excellent friend, longtime friend, Judy Rickard. Judy, where are you?
Wiggsy, I don't mind if you say something after. My name is Judy Rickard, and for those of you that have been around San Jose for a long, long time, you may recognize my last name. I'm supposed to talk about San Jose State, but I can't get up here and talk without talking about all the years that we spent with the religious right trying to get rid of us. My cousin with the same last name was one of the ringleaders of that movement. And I want to tell you a personal example. If you can, no matter what the issue is, if you can speak your truth to their power, do it. I wrote my cousin a letter, explained why he was wrong. He never got back to me. We never talked about it. But I said, you are wrong. You are hurting my community. So, small example, everybody can make a change that lasts. Okay? So, Wiggsy, San Jose State. I have to say something else too. Wiggsy is Baymet to me, as is Ken. I met Wiggsy originally at a party at Paul Wysocki's house in the 70s when I was with my first partner. I was a student at San Jose State from 66 to 70 in my undergraduate days. Didn't know Wiggsy then. Didn't know I was a lesbian then. Then graduate school over a period of years. Still didn't know her. Got to San Jose State in the 80s to work. First day, I go to the cafeteria. I'm really broke. I hadn't been working for quite a few months. Get the lunch. It was, $3.25 or whatever. I go to the cafeteria the next day, and the lunch is 50 cents more than it was the day before. I had the $3.25, right? I'm in the line. I don't have enough money to pay for lunch. Who's in front of me in the line but Wiggsy? And so she just sticks out her hand, gives me the 50 cents. Later, I really made, okay? And it is a very treasured part of my life to know you and the work we've done, to know Ken and the work we've done, and made it better for folks in Santa Clara County and the other 3 counties that Baymet serves. But in terms of San Jose State, because of Wiggsy, I served on committees I never would have known about. I worked with the union, staff union. I felt the difference between how faculty was treated and how staff was treated, and I tried to make a difference, being an outspoken staff person. I was personally rewarded by the things that we did as our staff faculty LGBT association. And I know that Wiggsy, single-handedly or with others, had made San Jose State a safe place. You know those signs at the fire department and whatnot with the baby, and it says safe place, and everybody knows if they have a problem, they can go there. That was what San Jose State became with the work that Wiggsy and others did. So, I can't say enough. From stopping Carl's Jr. to coming to the student union, to other things that we found out about and fixed. Thank you for everything.
All right, and next we have Judge Erica Yu.
Thank you. So I'm Erica, and I've known Wiggsy for over 20 years. I first met her when I was an attorney. Some of you may still remember Bev Friedman and Hetty Chang, who were Morgan Hill City Council people. And that 1998, I was the president of the Silicon Valley Asian American Bar Association. And someone came to me and said, did you know that in a city council meeting, Bev Friedman just called Hetty Chang a bleeping Chinaman bitch, and you guys need to do something about it. So I decided to go to all the minority bar associations and ask if they would come to a press conference and speak with me to decry what Mr. Freeman said. So I went to the Rainbow Bar Association, and I made some really good friends there, and afterwards I joined the Rainbow Committee, but I always thought, well, why is there a therapist in a bar association? But what happened was Robert Greeley, Joanne Adams, and Wiggsy said, this cannot stand. We are with you. And they actually even went to the next Morgan Hill City Council meeting and spoke up and said, as Caucasian people, our voice will be stronger, and we will be stronger together. So since that time, we've been great friends. We bond over Vietnamese food and sometimes peppermint ice cream, which is our favorite. And we've also worked together. I don't know if Rolanda will speak, but she definitely should, because
She's next.
Good. So I'll skip over some of the stuff that Rolanda may touch upon, but I can just say that Wiggsy, who's worked fearlessly and relentlessly to better the criminal justice system, has really had the foresight to talk about the needs of not just the victims, but also the perpetrators. Something that people now are embracing and learning through research is useful and actually curative, if it can be. She was on the Death Review Committee, which I'm sure Rolanda will talk about. She was a part of the Domestic Violence Council and all its committee meetings. She also, I'm not sure if anyone will talk about this, was a very valuable and motivating voice to make sure that all inmates in Santa Clara County are treated safely and fairly, particularly those who are LGBTQ, but she was really the lone voice for a long time on that issue. And then just to share some thoughts about her, you know, I mean, we've heard how loud she is and how vociferous an advocate she can be, but she's also truly fearless. I mean, Ken alluded to the fact that she put herself out there and took the hits. And it took that conviction, that fearlessness that she has. But what we haven't really dwelled on yet, and what I'd like to talk about, is her kindness. She has been able to co-opt people because she will listen to them. And she doesn't just listen to them, she listens to them with respect and authentic kindness. I mean, she really wants to hear what they have to say. And she tells me stories about some of her students who maybe didn't always see things eye to eye with her, but throughout, even if if she didn't agree with them, or if they didn't agree with her and they wanted to take away her marriage or her civil rights, she would always listen to them. And so for me, I feel like we're so lucky in this community, in this county, to have Wiggsy here. Whenever I've spent time with her, I feel buoyed, I feel more hopeful, and I feel like I still have the faith and the will to do it. We can do it like Wiggsy did it, we can do it the Wiggsy way, which to me is to cut through the compost, because I was told don't swear on camera. Cut through the compost with respect, moving forward with authentic regard for others, and with really a shining conviction for doing what's right and what's just. Thank you so much.
And coming up is Rolanda Pierre Dixon.
Goodness. That's James, my husband. Hey, Wiggsy. Oh my God, the stories I could tell. We go back over 30 years, I think almost close to 40. I was a baby then. I started out in the DA's office in 1981, and in the early 80s, Senator McCorkadale asked us to go on his first DV committee. And that's where I met Wiggsy. And we've been aces ever since. You wouldn't think so. African-American DA, lesbian woman, but hey, nobody could beat us. We fought them left and right, and we fought each other. But they need therapy. I said, yeah, but they gotta go to jail first, Wiggsy. They gotta go to jail first. We put together so many events. We did the first domestic violence walk in Santa Clara County. We did over 10 years. San Jose PD. We brought together people that folks would never think would come together to walk through the streets of San Jose and say domestic violence has got to stop. Wiggsy always spoke up for the gay community. I'd nod, and, yeah, by the way, Wiggsy would say. And we kept the mess going. Now, we met once a month for lunch, always strategy sessions. But of course, we prima donnas, honey. We met at the grill at Fairmont. I don't know nothing about all the other places, Denny's and all of that. And Wiggsy had her parking place right up front. I never got that. I had to park in the garage. In any event, it has been a wonderful time working with Wiggsy. I have missed her so because I retired in 2011, even though I know both of us have kept working and keeping the stuff stirred up since I won't cuss on camera. I'm so happy to have known her. When I fall down, she picked me up. When she felt bad, I pick her up. And together we were a hell of a team.
All right, next up, we go back to San Jose State with Kathy Pugalaki. Kathy?
As Ken said, my name is Kathy Pugalaki. I've known Wiggsy for almost 30 years now. I first met Wiggsy when I was a young professional back in 1989. And it was probably 2 months I was there, and we opened our first sport club. And we had a young person come in, a young man come in and said, I'd like to join. He said, and I would like to have family membership. But the family membership was his partner who was male. And the young person at the front desk said, I don't know if we can do that. Well, the young man left. Well, guess what happened? Next morning, I get a call at 9 a.m. in the morning. Wiggsy's on the phone. Who are you? And then she went on and said, the F word started to fly for 15 minutes. I'm surprised because tonight it hasn't. She hasn't used it once. And I'm thinking to myself, if I was to bleep this out, it would sound like Morse code because that's how many times she was using it. And at the end of her rant, I said, okay, so what do we do? Tell me what we do to fix this. So we sat down and we talked about it. Then I invited her to do a training for us, and as I walk in, she's looking at me, kind of like this. And I'm thinking, all of a sudden I knew she had put the L word on my forehead. And she did. You know, and I hadn't been out. I didn't feel safe at San Jose State, and I hadn't been out. By the end of that year, she had outed me. But I always knew she had my back. And I think for anyone at San Jose State, as many people who would walk in a room and say, oh my God, here she comes. But when things got tough, who was the first person they called? Wiggsy. All of us. So, and she's always supported me through my career. You know, I started in the sport club, I became an associate director, an executive director, an AVP of campus life. She was always there. And when I was in housing, overseeing housing, and we had issues, you know, whether it was a suicide or there was issues with fire or something else that would go on, because there would always be issues. I could call Wiggsy at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. She would be there. You can always count on her. And on a personal note, you know, I've had some personal issues with my health over the past few years, and recently with the passing of my mom. First thing when I call Wiggsy and we talk often, she says, how do I help you? How can I be there? And for any of you who become friends with Wiggsy, it's the first thing she says to you. So thank you. Thank you.
And yet another story of somebody at San Jose State whose life you really made a big difference in and has gone on to do wonderful things at the Office of LGBTQ Affairs at the county, Maribel Martinez.
Hi everyone. get a little emotional and feel an immense sense of gratitude to say that I have known Wiggsy my entire adult life. I went through undergrad having Wiggsy in my life, and that's such a blessing. I first met her when I was a resident advisor, and here comes in Wiggsy with this most fluffy, soft, fuzzy sweater, as she often likes to wear. And she did a training for counseling. And then she also invited a couple of us to be part of her diversity workshop. And that was the very first time that I did diversity work in higher ed. I then went on to do lots of things in diversity work in higher ed. I joined student government, and there was Wiggsy again, heading the campus climate committee. And so we talked about race and diversity and what we could do differently. She was my teacher in many ways outside of the classroom, and she taught by example. And she was so powerful in her truth that it didn't matter if it was the university president or an elected official. She was going to say what was right. She was going to say what often everyone else knew but was afraid to say. And so she was a wonderful example then. I was the first Chicana student body president at San Jose State. And that was 2001, so taken a long time. And it wasn't easy. There were a lot of targeted attacks about me being a woman of color. And I would always have safe space to check in with Wiggsy. She'd always say, how are you doing? We gotta get together for lunch. I gotta check in. How's your pal? How's your family? And really took the care. After I graduated, I went on to work in community work, and then I go to the Network for a Hate-Free Community, and Wiggsy's there. And Wiggsy's there pulling people together, talking about how we can be a community, how we could be a unified community against hate and violence. I went back to San Jose State to get a graduate degree and then to start the Cesar Chavez Community Action Center. And so I had the wonderful privilege of being Wiggsy's colleague. And she would have students in her classes, and she would give me a call and say, I have this great student. Can you follow up with them? I think they need to volunteer somewhere. I think they need to feel connected to the community. I think they can, need to talk to you and just hear your experience being on this campus. And I'd say, yes, Wiggsy, send them over. And then when things would go wrong, because people make stupid decisions, right, as Wiggsy would say, I would call Wiggsy and I'd say, Wiggsy, we gotta do something about this. I can't believe this happened. And she would hear me, I would say, send him over, or I'll make a call, or we'll make this happen. And so always being that strong champion. And always being so thoughtful and loving. My last semester in grad school, halfway through my thesis, my laptop got stolen. I was distraught, as you can imagine. And I'm on the phone with Wiggsy, and I'm crying, and I'm like, this is, months of work lost. And she goes, you could do it again. You know all the information, and I have a laptop for you. You can use it as long as you need it. And so the next day, she brought it in. I think it was Jeannie's thank you. Brought it in, I used it, I finished it, and it was great. So thank you for always, always, always having my back and finding resources when I didn't even think they existed. I want to give a great example of Wiggsy's commitment, because it wasn't just to queer kids, it was to any marginalized group. It was undocumented students, students of color, student athletes that would get, pigeonholed or would just kind of get run through the collegiate athlete industrial complex. She was very, very, very adamant about every student, Black students particularly, having a good future after San Jose State. But I had a student in particular, I don't know if Wiggsy remembers this, Latino, gay, from Central Valley, who in the middle of his first year had a mental health episode. He was working on campus, and part of the episode was that he had some very inappropriate comments via social media and text to other coworkers on campus. He ended up being hospitalized, and when he came back, he had a disciplinary hearing for his actions on campus. And I called Wiggsy and I said, Wiggsy, this isn't right. Why is he getting disciplined for something that was part of his condition, part of the episode? And Wigsy's on the other line going, idiots, stupid, idiots, no, my gosh, no. And then she said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. Sure enough, a couple days later, the student comes in, complete relief, saying, it's dismissed. It's done. I don't have to do this. I don't have to go through the disciplinary hearing. Wiggsy, I hope you're happy to learn that that student went on to graduate from San Jose State, top honors, lots of awards. He's now in his second year of an MA, PhD program in counselor education, fully funded. So because you speak up, because you support, because you do what you do, for all that you do, I am because of you. Thank you so much.
And so the last of the pals that are speaking, happy to bring up Mr. Gonzalez, James Gonzalez.
I think a smart thing to do when you look up to somebody is try to impress them. A couple decades ago, I became a police officer in San Jose, and I realized there were no other openly gay male police officers in the force, and at some point I decided that I wanted to come out. I found Baymek and I found Wiggsy, and I thought that was going to be impressive to her. For the first 10 years of my career, being a police officer was impressive to people, and I started to tell her, Wiggsy, I'm a police officer and I'm gay. She goes, yeah, I have one of those at home. I did it, nobody told me. Needless to say, instrumental in that process. It's been quite a journey. At times, there still are not a lot of out gay male police officers in the force. But I got involved. I got involved in our police union and in some very, very rewarding work, and I loved fighting for our working men and women. And I went to Wiggsy. I said, Wiggsy, I've got elected to the union. I'm the youngest person ever to be elected, and I think I want to run for leadership, and it's going to be scary. And she goes, yeah, I did that. I was a union president. Oh, okay. Needless to say, most of my Wiggsy time has been through Baymek. I'm still on the board. She's been on the board for 35 years, since it was started. All the other things that she's done, she's on every board and every committee, and in every place there's a marginalized person, she's out there looking for them. But in Baymek, she's never left. And I was Baymek president for a number of years. And anyone who thinks that you're totally president has probably not been president. Wiggsy's a counselor by trade, and again, I hadn't been to her office for a number of years knowing her, and I went there one time, and I sat in this couch that sort of slinks back, and she's got this big chair that sort of overlooks you, and I go, I know this feeling, only usually it's on the phone. And so this is the physical embodiment of that. Wiggsy has a lot of pets at home. She has a pet otter. And she'll often read the newspaper or watch the news, and then she'll give you a call and say, hey, we ought to do this, we ought to do that. And it's generally, it's many times for another community. One of the things she taught me early on is that we're in this together. And that if you're going to be leading this organization, then you are going to work with other marginalized communities. I look back at all the lessons in life, all the things that I've been blessed with, and without a doubt, where I am today is largely because of you. And I will always know that one of the biggest blessings in my life will always be knowing you and having you there, looking after me, looking after us. Thank you, Wiggsy.
Thank you.
You know, I, as James said, you know, to quote him, I am who I am because of you. And I think just about all of us have that same sentiment about you. I know, again, that I do. Going back to reading that anti-gay piece in '84, it was in March, and I think by June we had launched BAMEC, and so the relationship with you has been strong ever since over those 35 years. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have an organization like BAMEC was to be able to teach people how to organize. There was, at that point, because of the political climate, there was no gay organization. And I think of all the people who've joined the board over the years and the advisory committee and been involved, it gives them the tools to sort of figure out what the next step is, and so they can make a difference. I think everybody wants to make a difference, but they aren't always sure how to do it. And if you don't have the skills and you don't have the connections to figure out how you can make an impact, you're sort of stuck. And I think BAMEC has sort of given so many people opportunities that they wouldn't have had. And first and foremost, I include myself in that list, who had more opportunities because of you than I would have ever been able to do by myself. And to have the political career and to have the impact that I hope I had is really in part from learning from you, watching with you, knowing that there was somebody that I could work with and learn from and really make a difference. And as everybody has said, you always had my back. And so when I was thinking about the first event I wanted to do, when I think of the first event we did 35 years ago, and here we are now with the foundation still doing events, it's still in mailing lists and everything else that needs to be done. But I really wanted this to happen for you, so everybody could thank you for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
It's your turn.
Okay. Thank you very much. For all of you who have said things, I deeply, deeply appreciate it, because the reason I have been able to do what I do is because of you. The fact that you are there, that you always have been supportive and friendly to me, and that you can always, support me. So, it goes both ways. I have been successful with BAMEC because Ken was there, and other people were there. Maribel was there when I needed somebody. Rolanda was there when I needed somebody to pick on, because she's a district attorney. But I want to say a couple of things just before we finish. I know it's getting time to go on, but a couple of things that I think are really important is that I have been amazed at how people change. And one of the things that I was thinking back, I came back one summer, I didn't work in the summertime because I was a faculty person, so I didn't have to work. But I came back at the end of the summer for school, and somebody said to me, "Wiggsy, do you know that there's a Carl's Jr. coming to campus?" And I went, "You're fucking kidding me." I said, "Why is that?" Carl Kratcher, who was Carl's Jr., spent a lot of money on anti-gay legislation from down south. And I said, "No way, that's not happening on our campus." So I raised Cain. The president at the time, a guy by the name of Don Casting, came over. And he said, "Well, Wiggsy, we've already made an arrangement with him." I said, "Well, tough shit." Unarrange it. He said, "Well, I can't do that." I said, "Well, I don't know what you're going to do, but they're not coming to this campus. Our students are not going to give money to Carl Kratcher so that he can go beat us up. That's not happening." So we went round and round. But the thing about it is that Don stayed in there. That was the important part. He stuck with it. He didn't walk out. He didn't go away. He stuck in there, and he kept saying, "Can we do this? How can we do this?" Finally, the people from Carl's Jr. decided they wanted to come up and talk to me because they thought they could convince me that they were really a good organization. Yeah. And so they came. "Nope, sorry. we're not doing this. They couldn't get it. They said, well, he doesn't use much of his money anymore. I care about that. So, but I say that because I want to say something about Don, in that he actually canceled the contract. The whole university, he canceled the contract. And that's one of the things about doing this work that's so important, is that if we step up and talk to people and hold the line, they get it. They get it. So we have to continue to do that. And I've had so many incidents like that. I taught a class at San Jose State for quite some time. I had football players, baseball players in my class on homosexuality. These were not the enlightened people of the century, but they came around, So I guess what I want to say is, we can do this. We can make the world a better place for people. This does not have to be a world that's divided by color, by economics, by stature, by title, by, whatever. It can be a place where we can be together and where we can work together to solve some of the problems like air, water, healthcare, things that are necessary for living. So please, I want to thank you all very much. For many of you, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, because you really are the stars that light up the sky at night. So thank you so much, and I'm deeply touched by this event.